Join me as we learn Chumash for the Torah reading of Sunday, Acharei Mos-Kedoshim. As the Torah readings of Acharei Mos and Kedoshim are combined, these Torah readings that we'll be doing for this week are of these combined Torah readings. So today for Sunday, chapter 16, verse 1. The Torah today begins with telling us about the laws pertaining to Yom Kippur rituals and the procedures that were done on Yom Kippur. This was done immediately after the tragic event of Aaron's two sons passing, and the Torah now tells us about when one is allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, unlike Aaron's sons, as Rashi will explain. Verse 1. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, and God spoke to Moshe, Acharei Moshe b'nei Aaron, after the tragic death of the passing of the children of Aaron, Aaron's two sons, b'karvosam lifnei Hashem, because of the fact that they came near to God, vayamusu, and because of that they died. Rashi, verse 1. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe leimer Acharei Moshe b'nei Aaron. Ma Talmud leimer. Why does the verse tell me after the death? Meaning, what is the point of telling me this was after the passing of the children of Aaron? Over here, it's coming to stress the concept of the importance of the going into the Holy of Holies only in its appointed time. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used to give the following parable. Imagine a ill person who goes to a doctor to visit the doctor. The doctor tells the individual, don't eat this cold item. And don't sleep in this moist, damp place. Another doctor comes and tells him, just like the first doctor told him, don't eat these cold items, and don't sleep in a damp place. However, the second doctor adds on the following words, because I don't want you to die like that fellow died from the same problem and the same illness. The second doctor warned him or made it clearer than the first doctor. Therefore, it says after the passing of Aaron, meaning that he's telling them, learn from the fact that the children of Aaron went into the Holy of Holies when they had uncalled for time and they passed. So too, you should be careful when going into the Holy of Holies. Verse 2. And God said to Moshe, speak to Aaron your brother, and he must not come whenever he wishes into the sanctuary beyond the curtain, to in front of the cover of the ark, the cover asher al ha'arim, which rests on the ark. This way he should not die. For I appear in a cloud over the ark's cover. Rashi. He shouldn't die like the way his children died, as we mentioned previously, the example that Rashi gave of the doctor. And he will not die, meaning imba, that if he does come in an unappointed time, he is liable for the death penalty. Because in the cloud I show myself. Why does he use the terminology in the future? What the verse is saying is because I'm constantly there. God is saying I'm constantly there in the cloud of glory on top of and hovering over the Ark of the Covenant. Because that's where the revealed revelation of my divine presence is. Therefore, Yizor Shalayargil, has to be careful that he shouldn't be accustomed to going there. Lavai. That's a simple interpretation. Umedrashay, the Medrash explains, that over here the word is telling me that when should he come? Why does it refer to the cloud of glory? Meaning the cloud, when can he enter into the Holy of Holies? Only when he brings the incense, which that makes a cloud, the cloud of the incense that happens on the day of Yom Kippur. Verse 3, Bezois Yafei al Arin el HaKedesh. On Yom Kippur itself, only by the means of the following should Aaron enter into the Holy of Holies. Bepar ben bakar, only when he brings the young bull as a sin offering, ulechatas as a sin offering, va'ayil oil and a ram as a scent offering. Both of these have to be purchased from his own money, as we're soon going to see, and only after these special procedures was he able to go into the Holy of Holies. Bezois, The word bezais, Rashi tells us a fascinating thing over here, which is not usual for Rashi, telling us numeric value. Gimatria shaloi arba meyes v'eser. The numeric value of the word bezais is 410. Remez l'bayis rishain. This alludes to the fact that in the first holy temple, which was made by King Solomon, those were the times where the great people would walk into the Holy of Holies. And it was if, because they were so great, of the Kohanim Gedolim, was as if Aaron himself went into the Holy of Holies. With this Aaron, and even on this day, not whenever you want it. That means Aaron was able to go into the Holy of Holies. He wasn't even able to go whenever he wanted, and even in Yom Kippur there had to be a specific procedure that was done on the 10th day. Verse 4. When he enters the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur to perform the special procedures that were done in the Holy of Holies, what does he wear? He wears a special clothing. Not the usual clothing that he would wear, but this was special clothing for going into the Holy of Holies. He must wear a linen tunic, and linen trousers will be upon his flesh. And he will gird himself in a linen sash. And he must wear a linen turban. Bigdei Kodeshim, these are considered holy clothing. But he must immerse himself in the water before every single time before putting on these clothing. So before the Kohen Gadol would, and any time the Kohen Gadol would change from the gold clothing to the white clothing, which is what we're talking about here, the linen clothing, he would have to wash himself and immerse himself in a mikveh before changing to the clothing. Rashi, verse 4. Why did he have to change into the white clothing? Magid is teaching us that he does not serve in the Holy of Holies with the special clothing that had gold on it, that the same clothing that he would serve outside the Holy of Holies he would not use inside the Holy of Holies. The reason for this, the prosecutor cannot be the defense attorney. And being that the reason of why Yom Kippur came about was because of the sin of the golden calf, he doesn't go into the Holy of Holies with gold, which is symbolic of the golden calf as well. Ella, how does he go in? He would use the 4 garments that a regular or ordinary Kohen would wear, and they're all made of linen, and that's what he would go into the Holy of Holies with. Kodesh Yilbash, what does it mean? The holy you should wear? That the clothing that he has is purchased with the money that belongs to the holy temple. Yitznayf, that he wears on his head. He would wear this turban. Kedarkuma Yochis Bereishe would rest on his head. Yoniach Bereishe. Kemoi Vatanach Bigdei Vachaste. V'rochatz b'mayim, and to wash himself with water. Oisei Ayim Ton Tefillah B'chol Chaliv Esav. That day, anytime he changes his garments, he will have to go and wash himself with water. He would have to immerse himself in a mikveh. There were 5 times that he changed from going into the inner sanctuary to the Holy of Holies, and then going back and forth. And he would have to change from the gold clothing, lebigdei love, into the white clothing, and back from the white clothing to the gold clothing. And any time that he would change his clothing, he would have to immerse himself in the mikveh. And also wash his hands and feet before and after. From the washing basin. So besides immersing himself in the mikveh, he would have to wash himself before taking off the clothing, then wash himself again after putting on the clothing and after immersing himself in the mikveh. Verse 6. From the community of Israelites, this is money which was purchased by the communal fund. As we mentioned previously, the first one was purchased on his own. These were now purchased by the Jewish people. So he takes 2 goats, which those goats are going to 2 male goats, which will be served lechatas as a sin offering, and 1 ram as an ascent offering. Verse 6. And Aaron will then bring forward as parachatas asharloi, the sin offering that was for himself, and he will atone for himself and the sins for his household. Rashi, as parachatas asharloi, Hu ha'omer l'mayla. This is the sin offering that we mentioned previously in verse 3, that this is way that Aaron would be able to go into the Holy of Temple, was by bringing this sin offering. This one, that the Torah is telling us that the difference between this sin offering and the second sin offering, the original sin offering that was for an atonement for him, he had to pay for it, had to come from the Kohen Gadol's own money. The 2 goats had to come from the communal money. On these he would atone, he would confess about his own sins and the sins of his family. And in other places it's explained the sins included those walking into the Holy Temple maybe impure, or eating from the food impure, or any other type of sin related to the holiness of the Holy Temple and the sanctuary. Verse 7. Then he will take the 2 male goats, and he will place them at the entrance of the courtyard, Pesach Oyel Moed, by the entrance of the tent of meeting. Verse 8. Then he will place on the 2 goats lots, and which that would be Goyrel Echad Lashem, 1 lot for God, Goyrel Echad Lazazel, and 1 lot for Azazel. As Rashi is going to explain what Azazel is and what these lotteries were for. Rashi, he would stand in the center and he would put the 2 goats, one on the right and one on the left. And he would have the 2 lots holding in his hands. He would take 1 lot with his right hand and the other with his left. And then he would place the 2 lots on the animals, on the goats. Es shekasav by Lashem, hu Lashem, the one that the lot that the piece of gold that had on it said for God went to God. Veshekasav by Lazazel, the one that said on it Lazazel and placed it on that goat. Mishnat leich Lazazel, that goat was sent then to the Azazel. What is Azazel? So Rashi over here tells us the word Azazel comes from the word Huhar Az Vekosha. It is a mountain that was very steep, and it was it was a rocky mountain, with a very steep place to it. Shenemar Eretz Gezerah, because it says it has to go to a desert, a place where people are not settled. So the word Gezerah also comes from the word Chatucha, cut out, meaning that it was a place where it was a cliff, and it's sufficient enough that if it would fall right off the cliff, it would kill it right away just by being pushed off the edge. In other places, the commentaries explain that what Azazel was and why specifically Azazel. This goes back to different angels of impurity and promiscuity that were in the time of the flood that they tried before that who created evil in the world as well, and that's why the animal was brought there. But this is a separate discussion that Chassidus explains, and why specifically the animal had to be killed this way as an atonement for Yom Kippur. Verse 9, V'hikriv and Aaron would then bring the goat that it went upon him was the lot that which came him for God. He made that a sin offering, and he brought that as a sacrifice for God. Vaso chatas, Rashi, verse 9. He made it a sin offering. When he would put the lot on it, he would say, this is for God, and for God this is a sin offering. Verse 10. V'hasoyer, what about the other goat? Asher Allah love hagoydel, that the lot came on it, that it should be sent la'azazel to Azazel. Yom adchai lifnei Hashem, that would stand alive and would be protected, as Rashi explains, before God. L'chaper alav, to atone for it. L'shalach oisei amidbara, to send it. L'shalach oisei Azazel amidbara, that it would be ready and get ready to be sent away to the Azazel and then pushed off the cliff to its death in the desert. Rashi, Yom Adchai, what does it mean it will stay alive? It was ready to be alive. Kima Yom Adchai, it was protected that it should be alive. Al Yedei Acherim, by others. V'targuma Yivdaitokim Kadchai. What is this telling us? Ma Talmud Loimar, why does the Torah have to tell us that it had to stay alive? Because since it previously said that this one with the lot and it was sent to Azazel, and I don't know if I'm going to send it there to be alive. That means he's going to bring it to the mountain dead or alive. Therefore he says, Yamad Chai, you have to keep it alive. Amidosai Chai, it stays alive. Until it gets sent away. And from here we know that once he brings it there, he brings it up to the top of the mountain, throws it off the cliff, and that's when it kills it. To atone for it. That means they have to wait with this goat until he confesses on it, and he atones on this, and only afterwards do they send it away. So they after the Kohen Gadol says the confession on this goat, then it gets sent away to the Azazel. Verse 11. So Aaron will then bring the sin offering to atone for himself. Will atone for himself and for his family. And then he will slaughter the sin offering, the bull of the sin offering, which is for him. What's the difference between him and his family? So vidu sheni olav. This is a second time that he says the confession on the offering, for once for himself, and then the second time alecha v'kehanim for the kohanim, shem kulim kuriyim beise, which are all part of the household of the kohen. Shenemer, as it says, Beisarim Baruch was Hashem, that the family of Aaron, the household of Aaron, bless God, which is referring to all of the Kohanim. Mikan, from here we know, She'akayanim is kaprim, by that all the Kohanim, all the priests are in tone with this bull. V'chol kaparos neina al tumas mikdasha v'kachav. As we mentioned previously, that the reason why this atonement is for any impurement, for going into the holy temple impure, or eating from the holy items while impure, as it says, because the words are, and he will be atoned for the holiness mitum ois, from their impurity. So we know that the purpose of the atonement is for something that they may have done wrong in the level of impurity, or eating while impure, or entering the holy temple while impure. Then, after designating each of the goats for its respective purposes, Aaron then brought the bull as a sin offering. Following that, verse 12, she must then go onto the altar and take a pan full of burning coals, from the altar, from before God, as well as 2 handfuls of ketei samim, of incense, of the same incense, daka, very fine, and then he brings it beyond the curtain. Rashi, Me'alam Mizbeach, which altar is he taking the coals from? Hachitzein, the external altar. Lifnei Hashem, what does it mean before God? Mitzach Lifnei Pesach Vutzad Maravi, from the entrance, which is on the western side, which is towards the opening. Daka, what is the word daka? Meaning that it's very fine incense. Why does he have to tell me over here that the incense is very fine if all the incense was finely ground? As we read in the book of Exodus, you should make it very fine. Ella, when it comes to the ketoris, when it comes to the incense that was used on Yom Kippur, it had to be ultra fine, not just regular fine. So what they would do was that they would take from the regular incense, and before Yom Kippur they would put it back into the millstone, into the grinding, and they would grind it. There should be even extra fine for Yom Kippur. Verse 13. He would then take from the incense and put it on the fire, l'fnei Hashem, in front of God. And then the incense would envelope the ark covering that is above Asher ala idus, that's on top of the covenant. This way he does not die. Al ha'esh, he would take these coals that were there, in his shovel, which teaches us that if he wouldn't do it properly, then he would be liable of the death penalty. As the Mishnah explains this in detail, that there's a whole practice of how he would hold the different items, how some things he had to hold with his mouth, and then he had to hold it with his fistful, and had a whole balancing act of how he would actually make it from the altar into the Holy of Holies. The 2 curtains had a space in between, so he was able to go in between, so he wouldn't have to hold it, he wouldn't have to move any curtains. But the idea of how the Kohen Gadol would do this wasn't just a simple act, it was training that he had to go for 3 weeks, as the Mishnah in Yuma tells us, to be able to make sure that he did it correctly. Verse 14. Once that was done, then he would take from the blood of the ox, and he'll sprinkle with his finger towards the covering of the ark, kedma, eastward, and towards the actual covering of the altar. Yazeh sheva pa'amim. he would then sprinkle 7 times with his index finger. Min hadam betzpai, with the blood with his index finger. Rashi, verse 14. V'hiza betzpai, he would sprinkle with his finger. Hazah achas b'mashma, this means once only. This was not part of the 7 sprinkling of blood, 7 drops of blood that he did later. Then before the kaparis he would sprinkle 7 times. What does it mean 7 times? It's a total of 8. He would do 1 up, that means on top, and then 7 sheva lamata, 7 towards the bottom. Verse 15. Then he would slaughter the goat of the sin offering, asher la'am, which belonged to the people. And then he will bring that blood as well into the Holy of Holies, which is beyond the curtain. And he'll do to that blood, like he did to the blood of the bull. He will then sprinkle it on the covering of the ark, and in front of the ark's cover as well. Rashi, asher la'am, which belonged to the people, meaning just like the bull that atones for the sins of the Kohanim, so too the goat atones for the sins of the Jewish people. And this is this goat that was brought as a sacrifice on the altar. Like he did for the blood of the bull, which was 1 going up and 7 sprinkles going down. Verse 15. We just did verse 15, verse 16. This way, he thus affects atonement mitumeis b'nei Yisrael, from the impurities of the Jewish people, mitpishayim, and from their sins and their l'chol chatosim, for all their sins that they may have done, or the rebellious acts, or their unintentional sins. So too she do to the tent of meeting. That is, that they are in their states of defilement, that dwells amongst the Jewish people in their state of defilement. Rashi, Mitumeis b'nei Yisrael, verse 16. Rashi, Ala nichnasin lemikdash betumav le'neidu lahem b'seif shenemer l'kol chatesim v'chatas yishegeg. If a person mistakenly, inadvertently went into the holy temple or ate something which was of holy while they were in a state of impurity, so the word chatas means an inadvertent sin, pishayim. Ala nichnasin meizid betuma. That talks about a rebellious. That means wanton sin, that a person that he specifically went and did it purposely. That would be considered pishayim, something of rebellious act. So too he should do to the tent of meeting. Just like he sprinkled from both animals. He did that inside the sanctuary in the Holy of Holies. 1 above and 7 below. So too, once he goes out of the Holy of Holies, he then sprinkles on the curtain as well, shneim, twice, both from both bloods. 1 going upward, and 7 going downward. Even though the Jewish people may be impure and defiled, the divine presence rests amongst them. Verse 17, in order to atone for the possible defilement, and for all of these things, no one must be in the tent of meeting, when no person should be there, when he comes to atone, to effect atonement in the Holy of Holies, until he leaves. This way he can effect atonement for himself, for his family, meaning the Kohanim, and for all of the entire Jewish people. Verse 18. Once he concludes all that, while he's still in the outer sanctuary, he then goes out to the altar. Asher lifnei Hashem, that's before God. V'chiper alav, in order to effect atonement. V'lokach midam apar, he will then take from the blood of the bull, midam asoyer, and the blood of the goat. V'nosin al karnes mizbeach saviv, and he'll put them on the corners on the protrusions of the altar, all around, meaning in a circular motion, clockwise, going all around. Rashi, Elam mizbeach asher lifnei Hashem. This is still inside the sanctuary. He still has not gone outside. This is the inner altar, the golden altar. Shu lifnei Hashem, that's before God, beheichal, in the holy temple, in the sanctuary. Uma Talmud leimer v'yatsa, why then does it use the terminology he would go out? Because up until now we hear with sprinkling inside the holy of holies, and on the curtain, which was on the inner part of the sanctuary, and he was also sprinkling with these issues with these blood that came from the altar. So therefore, he then has to go beyond the altar, and he has to go and get the blood. And he has to start from the northeast corner to be able to sprinkle the blood as well. What is the atonement that he affects? How does he do that? He mixes the two bloods, the blood of the goat and the blood of the bull, and then by putting his finger in both of them, that's the way he affects atonement for both of them in the actual holy temple on the altar, which was in the sanctuary itself. Verse 19. He would sprinkle on the blood with his index finger, sheva pamim 7 times, v'tiharoi, and he would then purify it, v'kitchoi, and he would sanctify it, metumis b'nei Yisrael, from the defilement, from the impurities of the Jewish people. Rashi, after he already put on the protrusions with his finger, as we mentioned in the previous verse, then he'll put 7 sprinkles of blood on the roof, on the top of the actual altar. He will purify it from anything that people were not careful with its holiness in the past. And he sanctifies it, for the future. That this, the very fact that now he cleansed it and now it's usable and utilized, that it should be utilized properly in the future. Verse 20. He will then conclude, he finishes effecting atonement from anything that may have been defiled improperly. That's oil mayid and the tent of meeting, meaning the Holy of Holies, the tent of meeting, that's Hamizbeach, and the altar, the inner altar. Then he goes outside and he brings the live male goat as a sacrifice. Rashi, there's no Rashis on this. We continue to verse 21. The Samach Aaron, now that what we find so far, he continued, he was doing everything with the male goat. Now we continue to what the Azazel was for, and how he went about doing the work with the Azazel. In order to effect atonement on the male goat that was going to Azazel, then Aaron would come and lean his 2 hands on the head of the live goat. He will confess upon it, as kol aveinos b'nei Yisrael, all the sins of the Jewish people. Ves kol b'sheim, and all their, that means inadvertent sins, ves kol b'sheim, and all the rebellious sins. L'chol chatoisim, to any sin that they may have. V'nasan oisam al reish hasayir, he places all that on the head of the goat. V'shilach b'yad ish iti, and then he sends it with a person who is designated and ready for this job. Hamidbara, to the desert. Rashi, ish iti, what does it mean? A person who is a man with the time. Hamuchan lo yikach miyem esmel, a person who is ready for it from the day before. The Talmud also adds on that the word that it means iti, whose time is limited, because many times the person who took the goat to the Mount Azazel did not complete his year. Verse 22. And this goat will then carry with it, as kol aveinosam, all the sins that the Kohen Gadol placed on it. El eretz gezeiran, will then go to a place, in a deserted place, to the desert. And he would then send this goat to the desert. So the place that it would go to, a precipitous place, and then actually, which is in the desert, as we mentioned previously, the Azazel was a mountain, which a very steep cliff, and it was very rocky, which was on a deserted place. Verse 23. Afterwards, Aaron would then come to the tent of meeting. Aaron would then change his clothes and remove the linen clothing that he wore while going into the Holy of Holies, and he would then leave it there. What does it mean he would leave it there? As Rashi will soon explain. So Rashi goes through the procedures of what would happen on the day of Yom Kippur. And Rashi says that over here, the Torah gives it a little bit of shorthand of why he's coming to the tent of meeting, what's happening here. The rabbis explained, this is not actually the place of where this verse belongs, and it really belongs later on after verse 25 that he would return. And in the Tractate of Yuma, which talks about the laws pertaining to Yom Kippur, it explains that why, and has the rabbis received halacha l'Moshe Sinai of its purpose and why the place is right here. Va'omru, and this is what the rabbis explained. Kol ha'parsha kula nemer al seder. All the entire section of when it tells us about the service that had to be done in the Holy Temple was said in the order of the day what had to be done. Chutz mibiyazu, besides this coming out of bringing the spoon and the shovel. Which really was done after bringing the ascent offering of the Kohen Gadol's and of the Jewish peoples. And was done after the bringing of the sacrifices and the pieces of the lamb and bull, of the goat and bull, which those were done on the outside altar. And they were done as well, b'bigdei zav, in the golden clothing. After doing them, after bringing the sacrifices of the lamb and bull, the goat and bull, which was the sin offering and the ascent offering, then he would go back, immerse himself, wash himself from the kior, and then he would remove the gold clothing and put on the white clothing, and then go into the Holy of Holies. Then he would come back to the tent of meeting, to take out the spoon and the shovel that he used, that he used for the incense inside the Holy of Holies. And then he would take off his linen clothing after he took it out. That means once he brought out the spoon and shovel, and he was now outside the Holy of Holies, then he removed the white clothing. Then he would then put on the gold clothing, and the purpose of putting on the gold clothing now was to be able to bring the constant offering that was brought every single afternoon, the regular carbon tamid, and the rest of the work that was done in the Holy Temple for the rest of the day, as we'll soon explain. V'zeh seder avedis, and Rashi explains, this is the order if you want to know what and how it worked in the Holy Temple on the day of Yom Kippur. So number one, he would immerse himself in the mikveh. That was in the beginning of the day. That he would bring the constant offering, the offering that was brought every single morning, that was done in the golden clothing. That, at that point, he would also do all the other items that were done generally in the morning. So, for example, the incense that was done in the morning, and anything that was done on the inner altar. Then he would immerse himself a second time. He would immerse himself now for the second time to be able to do the work with the bull, the goat, that was done inside, and as well as the incense that was done with the shovel, all this that would be done with the linen clothing. Step number 3, he would now immerse himself a third time, that he would do his ram, the ram of the people, and also the extra sacrifices that were brought on the day of Yom Kippur. All this was done b'bigdei zav, in the golden clothing. Then what happened was, he would have to immerse himself a fourth time, le'yitzois kaf hamachta, b'bigdei lavan. As you recall, he had to go back, as we mentioned, he would go and sprinkle the blood inside and the incense of that in the Holy of Holies. That had to be done with the white clothing, so therefore he immersed himself a fourth time. The fifth time he would immerse himself, that was to bring Acharei Mos-Kedoshim, the leftover sacrifices that had to be brought for the day, v'tamid shel bein arbaim, and the sacrifices for the afternoon, u'kseidas ha'echel, and the incense that was brought in the inner altar in the afternoon, and all that was done b'bigdei zav, in the gold clothing. So there were 2 items done in the white clothing, and while the other 3 items were done in the gold clothing, but every time in between he had to immerse himself in the mikveh and wash himself before and after with the water from the kior, from the washing basin. The Seder HaMikrais, in the order of the verses, if you would put it in order of all the verses of how it would be Aveda, Kachu, this is the way it would be. You'll start with verse 22, which is V'shilachas Acharei Mabidbar, that he sends off the goat into the desert. Then you continue, V'rachas Acharei B'mayim, then he washes himself, that's the third immersion. V'yatsa Yisrael, verse 24, that he goes out and he does the ascent offering. V'eschela v'chatas, and the fats on the sin offering, verse 25. The chol ha'parsh, and the rest of the discussion. Ad v'achar chen yavi al ha'machan, and until then he would come back to the camp. That's verse 28. V'achar kachu ba'arein, and then you would put that Aaron would come back and take back the spoon, as we just mentioned, for the fifth time that he goes to immerse himself in the mikveh. What does he mean that he leaves the clothing there? V'nicham sham. So he doesn't leave them in the tent of meeting, but he leaves them in the place that he took them off, which is in the room of the mikveh that they had. Interestingly enough, in the first temple, they had to go outside the holy temple every time to go to the mikveh. In the second temple already, there was a mikveh within. There was a Acharei Mayim, and in there was already a mikveh that they kept, and that's where the Kohen Gadol would go. What they would do with those clothing, they would bury it, and you were not allowed to use those garments again for another Yom Kippur. It was only once used for that Yom Kippur, and that's it. Verse 24. He would then immerse his flesh in water, meaning going into the mikveh, v'mokim kaddish, in a holy place, v'lavash begadav, and he would then put on his clothing, v'yatzi would go out, v'asasei lasei, and it will do the ascent offering, v's'oilas ha'am, and the ascent offering of the people, v'chiper ba'adoi ba'ad ha'am, and that would be an atonement for him and for the entire Jewish people. Rashi v'rachatz b'sarei, as we mentioned previously about when we talk about the washing, previously we learned that when he changes from the linen clothing to the gold clothing, he had to immerse himself in the mikveh. That at that time when he immersed himself, he would then, this is by the second time, he would take off the gold clothing. He removed the clothing that he did with the constant offering of the morning. And then he would put on the special linen clothing for the service of that day. And over here we also learn that even when he's changing the other way around, when he's going from the white linen clothing to the gold clothing to go back to his normal service that he would be doing outside by bringing the ascent offering or by any other offering on the holy temple or on the altar, he would also have to immerse himself and wash himself as well. B'makim kaddish. What does it mean in a holy place? That was already holy as the holiness of the sanctuary. V'hi, where did he immerse himself? It was in the roof of the place called Beis HaParva. This was named on about an individual by the name of Parva. He was the one that built it. And that was the place where they used to prepare the Kohen, and that's where the Kohen would get dressed and undressed for Yom Kippur. So too, this applies to all the 4 immersions that the Kohen was obligated to go on that day. Meaning, the first time that he went to the mikveh could have been outside the holy temple. All the other 4 times had to be someplace in the actual holy temple, in a holy place, as it uses the terminology Mokem Kadesh, a holy place. The lavash es begadav, he would then put on his clothing. What clothing are we referring here? Shmoyne begadim, those are the 8 clothings that he would work with them the rest of the year. The white linen clothing was reserved and only for the day of Yom Kippur. The yatza, he would go out, mina heichel, from the main sanctuary, to the courtyard where there the outer altar, the altar for sacrifices, was there. He would then do the ascent offering, the ram for the ascent offering that we mentioned previously in verse 3. And then we said Aaron, because that was the only way Aaron was able to go into the Holy of Holies, was only when he had those offerings, but they were brought later on. And the ascent offering for the nation. This is in verse 5 we mentioned about a ram that one a ram for an ascent offering, which would be paid for by the Jewish people as obligation for the Jewish people on the day of Yom Kippur. As you can see, on the day of Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol had a marathon of things to do, and it was a busy day, and making sure that each one of them were done correctly like this would affect atonement for the Jewish people. This concludes the first Torah reading of Parshas Acharei Mos-Kedoshim.